Once again, welcome everyone to Baby Steps. I'm Bart Bartlett with the lovely Peggy Simpson here on a very hot Tuesday afternoon in St. Louis. Peggy, how is this hot Tuesday going for you?
Well, it's going okay as long as I stay indoors. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And how about
I
you?
think I'm doing well. I think we broke the triple digits today on heat index, and I know we're one of the few countries in the world that still go with Fahrenheit and not Celsius, but I'm telling you guys, it's hot.
You know, when it hits those temperatures, it doesn't matter,
It doesn't
right?
matter.
It doesn't matter what it is. It's just hot.
It is just hot. Well, I am super excited about today's topic. We're continuing our discussion on emotional intelligence, and you've got a great presentation on empathy, which is one of my favorite topics and something I think the world could use a whole lot more of.
I agree with you on that comment. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you all will be able to see it.
Looks awesome.
All right. So yes, we're continuing our discussion for those that might be viewing for the first time. And welcome to Emma and Jody. We're continuing our discussion on our emotional intelligence, right? Our EQ, not our IQ. And we talked about the different emotions, and we talked about self-awareness and self-management. And today we're going to talk about empathy. You might notice, if you've been watching us all along, that I'm skipping over social awareness for the moment, because I think so much of our social awareness relies on our empathy and the different situations that we're in, that I wanted to discuss empathy first, and then we'll back up. Yeah. So empathy, remembering our emotional levels, because this may come into the conversation. We talked last time about, there are various intensities of feelings, and we need to be conscious of the word that adequately represents how we truly feel for the importance of the situation, and don't always use, I'm furious, right? That's a very high level of intensity if it's just a minor distraction. You might not really be furious, you just might be frustrated. So keep those in the back of your mind. So what is the definition of empathy? It's the ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. And we're going to see some variations here. And the interesting thing is, we're all born with a level of empathy, but it makes a difference how we develop that, and our life, the way we're raised, whether we've been allowed to show empathy, right, will have a bearing on our development of that effort. So and I want to make sure that we distinguish empathy from sympathy, because it's a very fine line, but it's a very important fine line. With empathy, we are using a term for our ability to understand other people's feelings as if we were having them, right? Varying degrees of us actually feeling them. But with sympathy, we're recognizing someone else's feelings, but we're mostly feeling sorry for them having to go through their situation, or for them feeling the way they do. But we're not actually feeling it internally ourselves. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have two thoughts on this. Empathy, I mean, it probably is one of the most valuable traits that you can develop. I do believe that developing empathy is an acquired skill. It's not something you're born with. You're born with the ability to have empathy, but you got to develop that.
That's right.
And give you an example, and then give you an example of empathy versus sympathy. Here in the U.S. for quite some time now, we have been dealing with racial conflict, racial strife. And a person that I have tremendous admiration for, I consider a mentor and a good friend, is Mr. Ronell Sylvester. And he was doing a men's call several weeks back when a lot of the racial strife was heightened, and the majority of people on the call were African American Black individuals. And I said to them, I said, you know, as we're talking, I have no idea. I cannot even begin to imagine what it is to wake up every morning as a Black person in this country with this strife going on. But I want you to know I understand that I'm here to support you. I'm here to hear you. I'm here to be a shoulder for you.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's empathy. That's when you really put yourself out there. Empathy versus sympathy. The other thing we're dealing with right now is this coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
Just this week, a person that I only had the opportunity to meet once, but he impacted me just because the genuineness of this individual. And that is Nick Cordero, who is a Broadway actor that lost his life 41 years of age with a 1-year-old son. That's sympathy. That's what I give to them. So for me, empathy is something where you try your best to put yourself in someone else's shoes, but realize you really can't be there. But the one thing you can do is open yourself up to understanding.
Well, and I'm very glad you brought that example. I think it was a great example, but I think it will also lead us into something that we may not always be conscious of, and maybe some people have never even thought about.
Mm-hmm.
But the empathy is not just one thing.
Right.
Okay. So the empathy that you just described, we'll come back to. Let's see which one of these categories that was. Yeah.
Yes.
So there's 3 types of empathy. So it's not all the same. There's a cognitive, an emotional, and a compassionate. And let's just talk through those a little bit. Cognitive empathy, very useful at work. Knowing how the other person feels, what they might be thinking, you understand their perspective. It requires a lot of thought, understanding. But what's different about it is you recognize and understand their perspective, but you're not emotionally attached with your inner feelings, right? You don't feel what they feel. So in that example that you just gave us, you've not walked in their shoes. So and because racial difficulties are not like, cutting our finger, losing a loved one. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's one of those you kind of have to be in it to truly feel it.
Right.
Even me, right, with my biracial family, I have been in certain situations, so I can feel the same empathy and the feelings that a mother has for a young Black man when they go out, because I had those same feelings. I had that experience, and that's an emotional thing inside that I know what that feels like. But in your case, no. But the cognitive, but that doesn't make it any less important to have.
Exactly.
It's just different, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are just different. And it's, I think, worth recognizing the differences because of where they're most useful or where they show up. And that's not to say you can't have one of these other types of empathy at work.
Right.
But maybe it isn't the best place to display that level of empathy, right? Because at work, you want to be inspirational for people. You want to be collaborative with people. So if you have a well-developed cognitive empathy, that will really help you in understanding, if people are, like, you give a performance review and people are upset with the review you gave them. Well, if you thought you were fair, which I've had this happen more than one occasion, if you thought you were fair and they were upset, you need to try to understand from their perspective, right? Why they thought it was unfair. And having a level of empathy of putting yourself in their shoes of how would they feel if they were expecting, if a 1 is great and they thought they did a great job, they were expecting a 1 and you gave them a 3, which means they didn't do a bad job. They were doing what you would expect them to do, but that's a big gap in a person's mind. So you have to be able to deal with that. So the cognitive empathy is that type of empathy that you want to develop at work. You want to be watchful and mindful of at work. Any thoughts before I go on to the next?
I think as you're going through this with cognitive empathy, to me, this is something that a really successful mentor would be a strong cognitive empathy, because they're pulling not only from experience, but they're also pulling from education, from research, from studies, from things that they continue to feed themselves with to better themselves and provide that cognitive empathy.
Mm-hmm. And where this type of empathy comes in too, if you do have a team that you're leading, right? You think ahead of time what it is you're going to be discussing with the team.
Right.
And you're able to take their perspective and alter your presentation or your discussion to try to answer many of their questions or the feelings that they're likely going to have before they have to do it themselves.
Right.
Right. So if you're introducing a change and it's going to be stressful for them, then you anticipate their reaction and try to tailor your presentation to diminish that level of anxiety for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead here and talk about emotional empathy, right? So emotional empathy is where you really feel physically along with the other person, as with their emotions are contagious. So perfect one with my kids or with your loved ones, any relatives. Sometimes you can get this when you're watching a movie, right? That you're really relating with, and a character in the movie is going through a very bad time and suddenly the tears are coming down your face, right? It's really notice what this involves. This is your feelings, your physical sensation. It's a different part of your brain that you're using. It helps you though with relationships, and it can help you with your careers, like in coaching or in marketing. If you're trying to develop marketing materials that will attract or get an action from your target audience, you need to have this kind of emotional empathy. What's going to trigger their emotion? Because we know people often make decisions based on their emotion at the time. That's part of the equation. So interesting though that, again, the cognitive empathy helps you as a manager, does help you in career, but this one also has a place there as well. But it most often, I would say, shows up with your loved ones, or if you're watching a movie, something that just really moves you. Yeah.
As you were talking about watching the movie, several movies came to mind that are just tear jerkers. But one thing that really was like the oh wow moment for me was, one of the things we talk about is turn off the news, turn off the noise. And I do that, except I normally turn on the news at the very end. I'm talking now like national news or something else, because what do? They always end it, or they seem to now end it with a life well lived.
Yes.
And it's somebody who's fallen victim to the coronavirus, but they end it with a life well lived. And
or
when
some
I watch
other uplifting story.
It is an uplifting story. And when I watch that, it's not so much about me trying to have that emotional moment, but it's like, wow, I wonder what they would say about me. and how can you better yourself with that? I want to give a shout out to Jennifer and to Jeff for also joining us here. But you know,
And
personal
Cynthia
empathy.
Allen
I've
is
never
over
had
here.
kids, so I have no idea what that is. But I remember when my mother was dying, and we had her in hospice, and she and I, neither one were very close as adults. Because we live so far apart. But I remember going down and knew that the time was getting really, really close. And I had that personal empathy for her. And it was a bittersweet moment because she had achieved what she wanted to achieve, which was turning 90 years of age, but she also knew this was it. And I remember one of the last things I said to her was, or probably was the last thing I said to her was, you know, I can stay as long as you need me to stay. And she looked at me, she says, no, you came and did what I needed you to do. Now I need you to go. And that right there was a personal empathy on steroids, kind of, because we both knew what was about to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we both were
Yeah.
taking that space to make that thing happen. So that kind of also leads into your third type. I'm cheating, looking up here at the notes that you already
Aha.
gave me. but I mean the personal and the emotional empathy. You're right. That is just such a powerful piece of all this.
Yep. And the final category is the compassionate empathy, right? And the difference here is that from the emotional, right? The emotional, you feel it.
Mhm.
But with compassionate empathy, you feel it and try to help. You're moved to help if help is needed, right? So, and this is really the ideal level of empathy where we put action behind it. So it may be cognitive empathy, but when you put compassion, you put your action behind it. That's where you really are able to use your empathy to affect your relationships. And we'll talk more about that next time as well. But it's really this one is really about taking the initiative to help those where you're feeling their predicament, and you want to do something to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you know, the example I use with Ronell and the men's group and my comment there was a lot of compassion in that
Yes.
because I cannot even begin to understand what it's like
Mhm.
to wake up as a Black person in a society that is so divisive. But I'm here to say, I'm here for you. I'm not one of those people that feel that way. I'm here to support you. I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn. Teach me, help me understand.
Yep.
And showing that level of compassion, I think makes you a better person too.
I would agree. And on that same topic, there was a young woman that's a part of a project that you and I are both part of who did a video and a poem.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very moving.
Mm-hmm.
And it caused me to have to make my own statement, right, in my way,
Mm-hmm.
about the necessity to have equality and equity. Because she wrote her poem to express her needs. I could feel her concerns, her issues, but I needed to take some action myself as well, to show that support. So yeah, interesting. I don't know that I ever really thought too much about different categories of empathy before.
Definitely there are though.
But they are, when you really break them down, they really are different. So, just how do we show empathy? How do we consciously work on being better at showing empathy and feeling empathy? Acknowledging their pain, just taking the time out to really be sensitive, listen for what isn't being said, watch the body language, watch the facial expressions. You can sense a lot. It's one thing to say something, but when you see somebody's face, right, the expression on their face, you'll know whether they're they're feeling joy, or they're struggling with what they're trying to tell you, if they're anxious. So just be sensitive to those things and acknowledge, speak out. And if it's when and if it's appropriate, to say, I can really see that you're struggling with this. Let's talk about it. How can I help you? Right? That shows that you feel, if you verbalize it. Also, if somebody comes to you and shares something, in confidence, or just something that they're concerned about, show them your gratitude, that you understand how difficult that might have been for them to come forward and open up, right? Be encouraging to them, be supportive. And to that last, compassion, these last two things, if they're expressing challenges that they're having, once you've listened, once they've expressed what they need, if they haven't mentioned a plan, or if they're still struggling, then maybe what you need to do is ask them, because again, they may have been venting, just it helps them to process it out of themselves and figure out how to deal with it. But ask them, do you have any thoughts, or not that you have to share with me, but do you have any thoughts of how you might pull yourself through this, how you might deal with this, whatever it is they're emotional about? Anger, sad, happy usually isn't something that we're talking about here as, having to have some mitigation plan. But if you ask if they have one, or if they're looking for one, that leaves the door open, that if they say, no, I don't have one, you can ask if they'd like help to develop one. I've learned this the hard way. And welcome to Betty. We don't necessarily want to offer the solution that we have in mind, that we might see, right? Better to ask them first. Would you like to develop a plan? Are you looking for a solution? And would you like help? To know whether you should volunteer some of that information. And I'm sure, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on how to show empathy with people.
Well, I want to say right there, first of all, shout out to Diane and Jolanda for also joining us. But your comment there about what you had to learn the hard way by not giving someone a plan or not giving them a solution, that is cognitive empathy in my book, because you understand and it's to their benefit not to do that.
Well, so it also, they don't necessarily receive it well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
they might not be ready for that yet.
Right.
There might be more that they have to process.
Right.
That's where we don't know, but you're able to show your empathy about, and your willingness to support them and take action to help them get to a better place.
Right.
But you need to, it's kind of like asking permission, right? Other things you can ask is, would you like me to share any thoughts about how you might get through this? There's different ways you can ask them questions. But and I am number one guilty. And if my daughter were watching, welcome to Tommy. If my daughter was watching, or if she is, and I just don't know it, she'd be the first to say, raise her hand and say, yes, you do. I volunteer, right?
Right.
That if I see they're struggling, I volunteer to quickly ways that I can envision they might have handled something different, to not be upset or not feel bad about it or whatever. And I this topic today has given me a conscious reminder to be careful not to do that.
The other comment I wanted to make was when you mentioned about acknowledging the pain, sharing how you feel, and the body language of facial expression. I think we have an opportunity right before us, an opportunity to develop a higher level of empathy. A way to show empathy is because we're having to wear a mask. And when you see people and you communicate, 2/3 of your face is covered now.
Ooh.
So you need to learn how to communicate with your eyes. You need to learn, and there is a very effective, probably even more effective way to communicate through your eyes. See it as an opportunity to develop that.
Ah, good point. Good point. I love it. So a few things, there you go. Empathy is seeing with the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another.
Love it.
Just a few things to leave people with. I love this one. It is so appropriate for who said it and for this time. Learning to stand in somebody else's shoes, to see through their eyes. That's how peace begins. And it's up to you to make that happen. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world. That's a major statement from Mr. Obama there, I think, especially in these times. And last, the nature of humanity, its essence is to feel another's pain as one's own and to act to take that pain away. There is nobility in compassion, a beauty in empathy, a grace in forgiveness.
Wow. Just a side note on that quote, and shout out to Drew Pearson for joining us. John Conley, if this is the same John Conley, I believe it is, sounds like him, he was the governor of Texas. And I had a very unique opportunity when I was working with a program with Apple Computers, that his two grandsons were in our program. So I got to know him and his wife, and of course his daughter and the kids, and the son. And those two boys, they were probably, I don't know, 7th, 8th grade at the time. They were so full of compassion and empathy, and that was a learned behavior. So when I see them, when I see where he says that there is nobility in compassion, a beauty in empathy, and a grace in forgiveness, boy, those are three things I think we forget. And those are three things I personally feel like as a society is lacking right now.
Yep,
So
I would agree with you.
Thank you for reminding me about those two young men and that family, because they really were quite a compassionate, loving group of people.
And there's one other person that I thought of that exemplified an empathetic and compassionate character, and that's Mr. Roberts.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I've not seen the movie yet, but I totally agree with you. That is somewhat.
Oh boy. If you see that movie, it is moving. It really is. It's almost uncanny the way it's presented. But Mr. Roberts, he did have a very empathetic character and much compassion for people.
Right.
So hopefully this helped me. As I said, it was a conscious reminder, and it taught me about the 3 different categories, which I really had not given much thought to before. And a shout out to Betty, who has joined us over here. So hopefully this has helped one or more of our viewers today. We thank everybody for joining, and we want to be empathetic with our communications. And next time we're going to discuss the social awareness.
Ooh, that's a hot topic. I love it.
Managing our social awareness.
Well, Peggy, as always, you did a stellar job, gave us some amazing nuggets, some food for thought. And I would just say to everyone, work on your empathy. Go get a movie that'll make you cry. Go find something that will really impact you. I as you know, I've been working on my me time and doing things just to get away. And I got really hooked on the Netflix Stranger Things. Don't laugh at me, people listening, but I got hooked on that. And it's been 3 seasons and waiting for the 4th to come out. But the end of season 3, I'm not gonna tell you what happens, but there is a scene at the very end that, oh my God, does it really tug at your heart and show the real empathy, and how empathy, as Mr. Conley said, there's such a beauty in it, and there's such a grace and forgiveness.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you for this.
Well, it's been great today. I've had a great time. I hope everyone has enjoyed our session today, and come back and join us again on Thursday, same time,
Yes.
same channel.
And stay safe out there, stay healthy, and we'll see you guys on Thursday. Bye for now.
Bye.